So I wanted to just make a video on this so that it would be easier to explain, with visual reference and all. So I'll just go through the process quickly for how we handle delegate communication in this committee. So we can start with the form. This is pretty self-explanatory. Uh, it There are just three different questions. They're all required. Oh, sorry, yeah, four different questions are all required. The first one is whether it's a note to another delegate or to crisis. The second one is a question on who the directive or message is from. And the third one is who it's and that can also be to crisis or to any other uh, character in the committee. And then the final one is the actual text that they want to send. So we get responses and they all get exported to a Google Sheet that we created, which is over here. And as you can see, there are many rows because each row is a different message, is a different form submission. And in total, we ended with 754. So each time somebody submits this like one instance of this form, it enters a new row, and the timestamp comes here, the answer to the first question here, second here, third here, and fourth here. Now, how we translated this into our process is the interesting part because the normal process that SSICsim used was that we would see these messages come in here, and then we would write them, we would copy and paste them into the delegate's Google Sheet along with the timestamp perhaps, and then we would write the response directly into the Google Sheet. And then if there was a message between delegates, then you would have to copy their message into the doc for the delegate who the message is supposed to be to. So the problem that I found with this process is that it's very computationally taxing, and also the fact that it's not very efficient because analysts and the manager and perhaps even the director need to have many, many tabs open, one different tab for each separate delegate when they want to respond to their notes. And they need to keep switching tabs, and a lot of time is lost in that. So I wanted to find a way to try to centralize the whole process, and to do that, I'll explain how I did that, and I'll try to skip a lot of the technical aspect. So just to make it simpler to understand. So the first step and the idea behind this whole process is that in the end, we managed to make it so that all notes could be responded to through just this one sheet. Just this one tab had to be open to respond to any and all notes. So I'll explain how we did that. So first we had to create a separate tab for every delegate in the committee. As you can see, they're all here on the bottom. We had 13 different delegates. We had 13 different tabs. And in the first cell in A1, you have to just write the name of the character verbatim as it appears on the form in this section here. And then we implemented a formula here. This formula, I'm not going to go into the technical aspect as I mentioned, but we put in this formula into the entire A column. And what the formula was supposed to do is to filter out any and all notes and messages in this first tab from the delegate in question in A1. So as long as this delegate, for example, Jack Dunlop, Secretary of Critical and Strategic Resources, sent any submission through Google Forms and it was recorded in this tab, it would automatically appear in the next row here. So so now if you go into each and every delegate's tabs, you'll be able to see all of their notes and all of their directives that they ever sent. And then what I did next was I created this responses column, and the idea was just to write the responses to the notes or specifically to the directives, not the notes to other delegates, but to the directives in the responses column. So that's important, and I'll explain how the delegates themselves get to see this information in just a second. And then the final aspect was, you know, to be able to respond to the or to handle notes between delegates themselves, we need to find a way to do that as well, right? Because this responses column is only for directives. So if a if a character or a delegate wanted to send a note to somebody else, then we had this column, this incoming messages column. The purpose of this was to paste any sort of messages from other delegates to this delegate in question, as in Jack Dunlop, in this H column. So, for example, you have this first one here. It says it's from Alawani, who is another character in the committee. And when we see that message come in from Alawani, the analysts would have to just copy and paste it into this H column. Now, there is a way, certainly there is definitely a way to do this without having this separate H column to handle messages. But the reason why I did that, why I went with a separate, why I went with this strategy is because I did this overnight between the first and second days of the committee. If I had more time, I would definitely try to fine tune this a lot more. It would be a lot smoother as well, a lot more visually appealing. It's not it's not 100% polished, but regardless, it works as is. So those are the three columns in this tab for Jack Dunlop. There we have the A column, just to review, we have the A column, which gathers all of the possible directives and messages that Jack Dunlop sent. Then we have the B column, where crisis staff write their responses to the directives that are sent, specifically the directives. If there's ever a note that's sent, it isn't responded to in the B column. Instead, it's pasted into the respective delegate's H column. And then we have, as I mentioned, the H column, where notes from other delegates that are being sent to the one in question in this tab are pasted. So that's so again, each delegate has their own tab and they're all formatted in the same way. Now, how the delegates manage to see this, they have their own sheets. So here, I'll go to Victor's tab over here because I have Victor's sheet open already. This is Victor's directives and note responses sheet. And as you can see, it's formatted very similarly. You can ignore the D column, by the way, because this is just this is a committee specific mechanic, and it doesn't really need to be talked about. But the idea here is that I use the import range function to it's a very simple function, even though it might look complicated. The entire idea is that in like the first parameter of the import range function is a link to another sheet, and then the second parameter is what exactly from that sheet you want to import. So what is happening here is that in the A column, the B column, and the H column, all these values are just being imported from the respective delegates tab here. That's all that's happening. So if you go to Victor's A column, this entire A column reflects this entire A column. And this entire B column will reflect this entire B column. For example, let's just go down to one result here, B40. You can see it starts with the CIA is in possession of all his devices. If you go to B40 here, B40, the CIA is in possession of all his devices. As you can see, it's just like a perfect reflection of what's going on in the master sheet, I guess you could say. And the H column is also equally identical. So then again, each delegate has their own private directives slash notes responses sheet, and that's really it. I mean, if let's say it's obvious, as I mentioned, how they communicate with between how delegates communicate with crisis through the A and B columns. If delegate A and delegate B want to send each other a series of messages, then they would again just do that through the H column. So Victor sends a note to Jack. Jack receives a note in his incoming messages column, and then Jack responds, and Victor receives the message in Victor's incoming messages column. And for that, as I mentioned, I think I mentioned it, but just to be clear, the H column in the master sheet is not automated like the A column is. So the H column needs to be copied directly from the from wherever else the message appears. So if one of these here, as you can see, where is this? Yeah. In A5, Victor Draper sent a message to Director Garcia. So this message wouldn't be responded to in the B column, but instead, crisis staff would simply copy this message and paste it into Tony Garcia's H column here. And as you can see, if we try to find it, I'm sure yeah, it's right there. It's this one. And Oh no, it's this one, sorry. And so yeah, that's really it. I don't think there's that much else to it, but it's a simple. It's not too complicated apart from the perhaps the syntax that goes into the formula in the A column of each of these tabs, but it really does help with trying to centralize operations. I found that after all of the initial kinks were ironed out, that it went pretty smoothly, and both crisis staff and delegates did manage to kind of find it a positive system overall. So I don't know. I don't think there's anything else to really talk about regarding that. The only reason, by the way, just to clarify, the only reason we have these blue highlighted messages at the top of each tab is because these are the messages that were sent on the first day before I implemented this system, and so they don't have any responses whatsoever. That's just to clarify. So yeah, I hope that that makes it clear in terms of how the communication was conducted. If you have any other questions, then you can just ask me, of course. Yeah, hope that works.